Robert Monroe opened the door to the out-of-body world. He mapped landscapes of consciousness that most people never even dared to imagine. But what if his maps were only the first draft?
Think about it. Every explorer in history drew borders where their courage ended. For Monroe, those borders were vast, astral planes, mental realms, even whispers of spiritual dimensions. And yet, even he admitted there were places he couldn't reach.
And that's where Darius enters the story. He didn't stop at Monroe's frontier. He stepped off the edge of the map, into zones where time bends, space folds, and the universe starts asking you the questions.
So stay with us, because what Monroe revealed was the beginning. But beyond Monroe lies a territory that might just rewrite everything you believe about reality.
Before we go beyond Monroe, let's ask, who was he really? Robert Monroe wasn't born a mystic or a monk. He was a businessman, a man of radio, sound, and technology. The kind of person you'd expect to sell jingles, not map the soul.
And yet, in the late 1950s, something strange started happening. Monroe began leaving his body. At first, he thought it was a medical problem, stress, maybe even a tumor. But the more it happened, the more he realized this was no illness, it was a doorway.
Monroe didn't just keep these experiences to himself. He documented them, page after page, like a scientist of the invisible. And then he did something revolutionary. He asked, what if sound itself could guide the mind out of the body?
His answer was Hemi-Sync, sound frequencies engineered to synchronize brain hemispheres, nudging consciousness out of the ordinary and into the extraordinary. Think of it as hacking your own brain waves with headphones.
With his journals, his experiments, and his recordings, Monroe became the pioneer of out-of-body exploration. But even he admitted, humbly, I've only begun to chart the map. There are regions I cannot enter.
And that's the cliffhanger, isn't it? Because if the pioneer could only go so far, what happens when someone decides to step beyond the edge of his map?
This is where Darius steps onto the stage. He studied Monroe's maps, respected them, even used them as a compass. But he refused to believe the borders were final. Where Monroe wrote unknown, Darius read invitation.
For Darius, the out-of-body journey wasn't just exploration, it was expansion. He didn't just drift into Monroe's familiar astral or mental zones. He kept moving, past the markers, into regions that seemed to bend the very laws of physics.
He described places where time wasn't a river, but a spiral, where moments of past and future stacked together like pages in one infinite book. He claimed he could touch those pages, pulling memories that weren't his, glimpses of futures not yet written.
And then there were the living archives, vast structures of energy, pulsing with what he called the collective memory of humanity. Imagine walking into a library where every book is alive, breathing, whispering the stories of every soul that ever lived.
But perhaps the most unnerving encounters were with entities, non-human intelligences. Some guided, some questioned, and others just observed as if curious about him. Darius joked once that it felt like being on an interdimensional reality show. Who's watching? He never got an answer.
Yet through all of it, the message was clear. Monroe's maps were magnificent, but incomplete. There were regions even he had only intuited, and now Darius was walking there, pen in hand, sketching the outlines of the unimaginable.
So ask yourself, what would it feel like to know that every memory, every thought, every possible future is already alive, waiting for you to notice it? Would you dare to look? Or would you turn back?
Of course, this raises a question. How did Darius go further? Monroe had his Hemi-Sync tapes, carefully engineered to synchronize the brain.
But Darius experimented with something different, a fusion of discipline, intensity, and curiosity.
He used high-intensity meditation, pushing himself to the edge of stillness until the body almost disappeared. Sometimes he fasted. Other times, he used sound, not just as a guide, but as a hammer, shattering the boundaries of ordinary perception.
And unlike Monroe, Darius didn't stop at observation. He tested methods. He asked, what if I bring questions into the out-of-body state? What if I try to retrieve answers? He wasn't just a traveler, he was a researcher, chasing data in the dark.
One of his most haunting experiments led him face to face with himself. Not a dream double, not a hallucination, but what he described as a future version of Darius, older, calmer, carrying memories of things that hadn't happened yet.
Imagine looking into the eyes of your own future, seeing your scars, your wisdom, even the regrets you haven't lived through yet. Was it prophecy? Was it imagination? Or was it the mind collapsing time into one impossible moment?
Whatever it was, the encounter shook him. Because if consciousness can step outside the body, maybe it can also step outside the calendar. And that means the question isn't just where you go when you leave your body, but when.
If Monroe was the pioneer and Darius the cartographer of the uncharted, then what comes next? The future of out-of-body exploration may not belong only to mystics. It may belong to science itself.
Already, neuroscientists are studying out-of-body experiences in labs. They use virtual reality, sensory deprivation, even brain scans to trigger the sensation of leaving the body. And though their language is cautious, the results whisper the same thing Monroe said decades ago. Consciousness is more flexible than we think.
Meanwhile, physicists talk about the holographic universe, where every fragment contains the whole. Doesn't that sound eerily close to what Monroe and Darius described? The sense of accessing infinite memory, infinite presence from one single point.
And here's where imagination meets reality. What if future technology could link the brain directly to these states? Mind-machine interfaces. Consciousness explorers, not just meditating, but navigating with tools, like astronauts of inner space.
Think about it. One day, mapping the out-of-body world might be as ordinary as mapping the ocean floor. And when that happens, the question will no longer be if consciousness is more than biology, but how far it can really go.
So let me ask, are you ready to go beyond Monroe? Are you ready to step into a future where science and spirit might finally share the same map?
Robert Monroe gave us the first map. He showed us the door and proved that consciousness is not chained to the body. But Darius reminds us that the map is not the territory, and the territory is infinite.
So where will you begin? Will you follow the familiar paths Monroe laid out? Or will you dare, like Darius, to step into the blank spaces where reality bends and the universe starts asking questions back?
If this journey opened your mind, share it with someone who needs to know that the borders of reality aren't fixed. And tell us in the comments, if you could leave the body tonight, what would be the first place you'd explore?
Give this video a like if it stirred your curiosity. Subscribe to The Quantum Soul to keep exploring with us. And right now, 2 more doors are opening on your screen. Choose the one that calls to you most and continue the journey.